used in like MP3 players and different types of media players, so that makes it still very important to learn about. So it essentially makes a system call until the directory is found that the file is in, and then calls for the specific file. And then the file size can be stored up to 4 gigabytes. So it stores a few values in its block. Here's an example of that. One is the file name, which is 8 bytes, and then extension for that, a reserve, and then it also holds the date and time, and then the file size. A really interesting fact about that is that it only supports a 7-bit number for the date and time, so it will only support up to year 2108. After that, we're going to have kind of like the same catastrophe that could have happened in year 2000. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So it's always a 32-byte entry, in addition of all of that, and up to an 8-character name there. So here's an example of the file formats FAT12, FAT16, and 32, and what it supported for its blocks. And these each had their own. They each had benefits other than what file size or the sizes that they could hold. For example, the FAT16 with an 8 gigabyte disk, it had to have 4 partitions instead of 1 partition with the FAT32, and how much size it could hold, of course. So you could also have a smaller block size in FAT32, so it occupied a lot less space. It always had to be a 32 kilobit block in FAT16, so sometimes you would waste space. It would only allow you to have up to 64,000 available addresses, versus you could have 512,000 blocks, but it uses more RAM in FAT32. So next is the UNIXv7 file system. It only has 2 entries for its fields. One entry is the file name, and the other is the inode, in which it increments. And it is a fixed spot on the disk every time. The inode is 2 bytes and the file name is 14 bytes. This includes the creation, the last access, the last modification, the owner, protection info, and number of directory entries pointing to this. One of the flaws of the UNIXv7 file system is that the root points directly to itself. Every time a new link is created to a file, it increments the inode by 1. And depending on the size of the file, it links different blocks to different sections here. So as you can see, the inode increases when the file is searched for, and then it goes through a single indirect block, double or triple, depending on how large the file size is. With a larger file size, it could take up to the triple indirect block before it gets the actual address that it is then going to open to get the file information out of. Once the file is open, the inode is open and everything incremented until the file is closed.
So next up we got the CD-ROM file system. These CD-ROMs are particularly simple because they were designed for write-once media only, and they have no service for keeping track of the files or the free blocks, because they can only be written once and added, or free. They can't be written or freed after manufacture. The ISO 9660 file system, it's the most common standard, and then you have the Rockridge, which is used for Unix file systems, and then the Juliet extension, which was created by Microsoft for their Windows file system. Now the ISO 9660 file system, the goal was to make it standard for every single disk so that it could be readable on every computer. And it had a single continuous, CD-ROMs have a single continuous spiral containing the bits in a linear sequence. The bits along the spiral are divided into logical blocks of 2,352 bytes. Some of these are for preambles, error corrections, and other overhead. And when they're used for music or CDs, they have lead-in, lead-out, and interactive intertrack gaps. every CD-ROM begins with 16 blocks whose function is not defined by the ISO standard. It was used so manufacturers could start up the whole program. Next comes one block containing the primary volume descriptor, which contains some general information about the CD-ROM. It contains the root directory and telling where to find the CD-ROM. The root directory consists of variable numbers of entries. The last contains a bit marking to mark it as the final one. Then when it comes to the starting block of the file itself, with the time and date that the CD-ROM was recorded, becoming stored in the next file with separate bytes for the year, month, date, hour, minute, second, and time zone. The next field comes with the flag field, containing a few miscellaneous bytes, including one to hide the entry listing, one to distinguish an entry that is the file from an entry that is a directory, one to enable the use of extended attributes, and one to mark the last entry in the directory. The next field details with interleaving pieces of files. The next field tells which CD-ROM the file is located on and how it can reference each file. The following fields give the size of the file name in its bytes and allows by the file name itself. The base name can be up to 8 characters with an extension up to 3. With the last two fields not always present, the padding field is used to force every directory entry to be even numbers of bytes. The last is the system